Alanna, it is awesome to have you on the podcast. You contributed to one of the timely topic discussions when you talked about resilience, and have you back on to go much deeper into the topic. So thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So today is, I've even got to look at my calendar. It's April 24th, and it feels like the longest decade that I can remember. And we're really not even a third of the way through the year. We are operating in interesting times.
I would agree. I would 100% agree. I know these words are being overused, but unprecedented, a new normal, all that stuff that everyone's using is so incredibly true.
And so when you think about that, like this new normal and unprecedented times, what's unprecedented about it? And, not specific, I guess, about the disease and pandemic. And I guess that I'm even going in and, well, let me just stop there. I'll just say, what is unprecedented about it?
I think it's a great question. I think the biggest part that is unprecedented is just the level of uncertainty that we have in our lives. Now, uncertainty is one of the top human stressors, just one of the top. It's just, we're wired that way. We're wired to fear uncertainty. It's kept us alive for eons. And so the problem there is that we are just living in, as we all know, and are experiencing every moment of every day, incredible times of uncertainty. We don't know how anything that's going to shake out, economy-wise, our own personal lives, when everything's going to come. So that is, to me, that the foundation of what is so unprecedented around now. And this uncertainty drives incredible amount of fear and anxiety in people, and all kinds of stuff cascades down from there.
So how, given that we're all in this operating environment where there's this high level of uncertainty, are there some things that we can do to overcome the challenge of uncertainty? Is there anything that we can do, any practices we can put in place to help us deal with that uncertainty better, knowing that it's not really going to go anywhere because there's political motives, there is uncertainty related to the data that's out there. I mean, there's just so many different moving parts here. If we think that it may not go anywhere for a period of time, how do we deal with uncertainty?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's the magic question. And I am an expert around the science of resilience and in general and health and well-being. I'm a health coach and all this stuff. But, at Equilibrium where I work, we are about resilience, and it really can be our guide now. I feel like I keep saying, everybody needs resilience right now, because it really can be our guide and to help us through this uncertainty. Because at its base, we need to, when it comes to uncertainty, as I was saying before, it drives all this anxiety and fear within us. And we need some tools foundationally to handle that. And to check our thinking. And we talked about this the other day around Trap It, Map It, Zap It. We need to be able to, and that's just a fun way for us to be able to remember to catch ourselves when we start to fall into that anxiety hole and worst case scenario, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to leave my house again. Catch ourselves when we start doing that. And just to reframe, okay, well, it's not that I'm never going to be able to leave my house again. Maybe it won't be for a little while, but I will, and just kind of move yourself up the scale a little bit, reframe, trap that emotion, map it to that thought, I'm never going to leave my house again, and then zap it. How can I reframe that to make it, pull me back from the stress a little more?
Yeah. And I'll include a link to that discussion. It really wasn't a discussion. It was just me rapid firing some questions that Alanna went through, what is resilience? In this one, since this one is going to be one of a longer form discussion, we can get into some specific details here. So let's talk about the three components: the trap it, map it, zap it, and break each of those down. So what do you mean by trap it?
So we want to trap the emotion. That's what, you feel the emotion first before you even know that you're thinking it. So when it comes to anxiety, that's for some people, it's a tightness in the stomach, or you feel kind of hot or flushed, or your shoulders are up by your ears, or you've been clenching your jaw for 2 hours, or, you get a hot flush, so sort of recognizing those signs. For me, my jaw gets super tight and my shoulders are so recognizing when we're starting to feel anxious or tightness in the stomach, butterflies. And then mapping it, okay, I'm feeling anxious. And then you want to map it to a thought. What am I thinking? Oh, Because so much of the time, we're not even aware of what we're thinking. We don't even know that we're, what those thoughts are that are driving us to feel anxious. So mapping it to the thought, like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to leave my house again. I might lose my job. What if my family gets sick? Start to bring awareness to those thoughts. Because if you can't bring awareness to what you're thinking, there's no way you can change it and no way you can catch yourself. So having that awareness is really powerful. So the map it step is just like being like, okay, well, what am I thinking? And then zapping it is really just a fun way to talk about what psychologists call reframing your thoughts. So, we're gonna 9 times out of 10 overshoot how bad something is, overshoot our anxiety or anger or frustration more than we need to. And so the goal here, and not to say that we shouldn't feel anxiety now. I think that's an absolutely valid feeling. But, we've got to walk ourselves back a little. So how can I walk myself back a little bit from the feeling I'm never going to be able to leave my house again? Well, I can go for walks. Each week is going to present a new set of opportunities and circumstances and, this and that and the other. So walking ourselves back.
Is gratitude part of the practice in here someplace? Is that something else that do we consider in this, or is that separate, or is it even just not something that we should even worry about?
No, that absolutely is. So so that trap and map is that, but it's kind of one tool, but we have lots of tools in our toolbox.
Okay.
And gratitude is another one. I mean, I can't say how important that is right now, because we are wired to feel negative emotions more easily and quickly than positive emotions. And when in times like this, crazy times that we're living in now, we could just be binging bonging all day long to different anxiety, then to sadness, and then frustration. Oh, I'm angry about this. So bringing gratitude in is just an amazing antidote to the sort of negativity that we can all get mired in now. And the research is really cool around positivity and gratitude, because you can actually create new neural pathways in your brain with simple, regular positivity practices. And we'll so quickly skip over the good and just default to the bad. But if you just take a moment to look for the good, then you'll start to see that it's around you, that there are good things. And one of the practices you can do is just something so simple. We just writing down or thinking of 3 great things that happened in a day. And, we do it at the end of the day around the dinner table, the family. And sometimes, to be honest, the last few weeks, it's hard to find those things, but you got to reach and you do it. It's like, okay, well, I got a package in the mail today and we talked to grandma on Zoom and, whatever it is. Today I went for a walk with my son at noon. That was really nice. We had a great conversation. So finding those little things can really help you appreciate.
So why are we wired to look for the negative? What's the background there?
Yeah, so we have to go back 1 million years or so to the beginning of time. No, we don't have to go back that far, but back, it's a survival mechanism. Back when we were being chased by lions and tigers and bears, that kept us alive. We don't need that ability now, but we're still wired that way nonetheless. And I have a fun story I tell about that. So if we go back 1 million years or 100,000 years or whatever, to times when we were living in caves, hunting, gathering, there's two guys. We got Thor and Gollum. Now, Thor is, sitting in the grass. Sun is shining, they have a nice cave, there's a stream nearby, and he's enjoying the day. And Gollum's like, Thor, I think there's a saber-toothed tiger over there in the grass. And Thor's like, Gollum, you're always so nervous and freaking out and worried about getting attacked. I like it here. We got a garden. Things are good. I'm good. And Gollum's like, he's getting closer. And Thor's like, just chill. It's a nice day. And Gollum's like, he's coming. And he shoots off, heads to higher ground to safety. Moments later, Thor gets swallowed by a saber-toothed tiger. Imagine years upon years upon years of this natural selection. And it's created what we call a negativity bias in us, right? So that's where that survival instinct comes from. So, yeah.
It makes me think, one of the things I used to joke about with people is, in the context of paranoia, is just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not chasing you.
Nice. I like that.
So it is, And there's a healthy part of the paranoia in that it can help you avoid risk and be more, aware of challenges. But there's this unhealthy piece, which is you constantly are we just sucked into this vortex where we're constantly searching for the negative piece or the something that's going to stimulate that aspect of our brain?
Yeah. So I like what you said about, about the positive, because there's upsides and downsides to all aspects of our personalities and everything. So to your point, for me, I'm a high functioning anxiety perfectionist, right? And that's gotten me to where I am today. Like there's some upsides to that. There are some downsides too, right? And we just have to recognize those. But to your point about, are we always looking for these negative emotions? It's something that I like to call, we like to call our emotion radar. And so it's a way of thinking about how we're scanning the world all the time for these negative emotions, and we will experience them all throughout our lives, all the negative emotions from sadness to anger to frustration, shame. But we have a radar. Each of us has a radar where we'll scan for one more quickly and often and easily than others. So, those anger people, when we're driving, they're like, hey, would you cut me off? That's someone's got an anger radar, Mine is anxiety. I'm always worried about what might happen. There's people that are frustrated, they're always scanning for well, I didn't have what I needed to do that. Frustration's always a lack of resources. I didn't have what I needed, enough time, energy, people. So we'll all sort of default to one more easily than others.
So we just kind of dove right into the conversation and didn't share your background. I know you talked just briefly about it. Can you share your background and kind of how you've gotten to where you are and why this is such an important topic for you?
Sure. Yeah. So I work at a company called Mequilibrium, which is a SaaS tool and an app that helps people manage their stress and build their resilience. And it's all based on the science of resilience and cognitive behavioral therapy. And in my role, I'm the director of content. So I create all the programs and the product and really translate our science to really actionable ways that people can build their health and well-being. And I've been in the health and well-being field for most of my career. I spent a long time in media. I've been a yoga teacher. I'm also an integrative health coach. And I was trained at Duke, and integrative health coaching is really just health coaching, but I combine sort of Eastern and Western modalities to support my clients in reaching their health, well-being, and life goals. So yeah, and I'm also a breast cancer survivor, a very recent one. And I have to say, I've put resilience to the test. And last year was when I was really going through treatment, and I was so thankful to have these skills to get through.
So can you talk a bit about that, how these skills helped you push through that challenge?
Yeah. So, when, even now with, dealing with this COVID-19 pandemic, I feel like it's last year prepped me for this because, there was such a time when I was going through my treatment where I didn't know what my treatment would be. I didn't know if I'd need chemotherapy or radiation or what. There's so many unknowns when you find out you have cancer and going through treatment, and you really have to stay present in the moment. You can't let your mind go to even a week or 2 weeks down the road. So one of the things that, I was really practicing was staying present in the moment and using mindfulness techniques, managing my anxiety. Like you mentioned before, gratitude and positivity, just finding those moments and those things to be grateful for, even in a situation that was horrible. But the funny thing is there was so much good that happened even within this most challenging situation with breast cancer. My mom and I got really close. She was staying with us. Our relation as adults, I'd never spent that much time with my mom. And, that was an amazing thing. It's sort of one example of some beautiful things that happen even in the midst of challenge.
So what is mindfulness?
So mindfulness is really just the practice of being present in the moment. And you can do that through meditation. So often our minds will just go off to future thinking. What about this and that? What if, what might happen in the future? Or past thinking, like, oh, why did that happen? This kind of thing always happens to me. So the practice of mindfulness just is about staying in the present moment. And you can do that through just simple breathing techniques, taking a few deep breaths, or meditation, or even that trap it, map it, zap it, right? So that's going to get you in the present moment too. Like, okay, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? Yeah.
So we've talked about trap it, map it, zap it. We've talked about gratitude, and we've talked about mindfulness. What are some other things we can do when thinking about building practice of resilience, or building would it be considered a practice? Is it a skill set? Is it a capability? Like actually, maybe we should just start there. What is resilience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So resilience is defined as our ability to bounce back from challenge, to manage stress, and to move forward and thrive in our lives. And a lot of people think resilience is just that grit to kind of get through stuff. And it is that, but it's more. It's really it's not just about getting to zero. It's also about thriving in our lives. Mm-hmm. And it's not something you're born with or not born with. It's a learnable set of skills that's been researched for over 25 years. And so it's something that anybody can build. And it is a practice. It's a set of skills. And to your point, it requires, practice.
It's awesome to hear that it's learnable, because there are a number of people who just still say, look, I can't do that. I'm not wired that way, or I'm not built this way, or I don't have this capability, or whatever it is. And what I'm hearing is, no, you can train, you can build a capability. You can go through some of the tools like you talked about with trap it, map it, zap it, things like gratitude, mindfulness, and build out a capability.
That's exactly right. 100% right.
So what are some other ways that folks can think about building out this capability?
Yeah, I think another really powerful tool we can have in our toolbox right now to help us is helping with the worst case scenario thinking that so many of us are dealing with, and to do that, and to also just give ourselves feel like we have a little more control. So I think one of the stressful parts of living right now in this pandemic is not being able is a real loss of control. We've all had a loss of control, right? Our schedules have been thrown up in the air. We can't leave our homes. And that causes a lot of anxiety for folks. And so another sort of tool is to just be able to let go of what you can't control, but find one thing that you can control, right? So what can you control right now? I may not be able to leave my house, but I'm trying to go for a walk every day at noon with my husband or my family or whoever. That's one thing I control. If I can't do anything else, if I'm not supposed to leave, I can go for a walk every day. So what small thing can you control within this uncontrollable situation? And that can be another really powerful tool.
Yeah. Control what you can control is one of those phrases that I go back to often. And I will butcher things like the Serenity Prayer when talking about it in that context, but there's a trap that we'll fall into as sales professionals is that we'll get so focused on our ability to convince the buyer to buy, and we're not going to be able to convince people to make certain decisions. We can provide them with information to help compel them to take a certain action. We can help them reveal blind spots by shifting perspective with the questions we ask. We can put all of the things in place to help guide them along that path, but it's ultimately up to them to make the decision. So if we're looking at it from the viewpoint of we can make the decision for them, then we're already in a position where we're probably going to have a high amount of failure. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that. And as you were talking, I was sort of thinking about other skills right now, particularly related to sales professionals that can be useful. And we've been talking a lot about the role of sort of like empathy and connection now. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we can all agree that, our lives have been kind of leveled in some way, and coming to the table as a sales or marketing professional with authenticity and empathy, I think will go such a long way. in making those connections. That's a sort of another key tool I think we have in our toolbox right now is this importance of connection and making real connections, with people now. And there is an opportunity for that as we're all in this boat together.
It's kind of interesting, this whole empathy thing. I think there are a lot of people out there who talk about it, and there's a meme that goes around periodically around certain words, and it comes from the scene in The Princess Bride where one character is saying a word and the guy says, you keep saying that word, but I don't think you know what it means. And we get into this situation where we talk about empathy, but we may think that we're being empathetic, but we're not, or we're missing. What are some common mistakes that we make around empathy? And actually, am I misreading that some people think that they are being empathetic, but they're not really being empathetic. They're being something else.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. So yeah, I mean, the definition, which many of us know, is that ability to see ourselves in someone else's shoes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that capacity is really, I think some people confuse sympathy with empathy,
mm-hmm.
right? So sympathy is like, oh, I'm sorry. Empathy is like reaching your hand out and helping them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a critical capacity for collaborating. You kind of have now, particularly now that we're all remote, right?
Yep.
It's like how we've got to be able to connect with people in meaningful ways, to be able to collaborate and perform well and to do our jobs. And so, empathy is that practice really fuels connection with people, and that connection fuels our ability to perform at our highest levels. So, it's some of the practices are simple as like, asking someone how they're doing, having,
mm-hmm.
check-ins. I did something last week with my team, and I scheduled 15 minutes. We just had coffee with like my pod that I
mm-hmm.
typically sit with at the office, but I don't really, those people aren't all on my team. And so I haven't really been talking with a lot of them. And so I scheduled a coffee and we just talked about Tiger King, because what else would we talk about? But fostering those.
I will never get that time back. It's one of those where I look at it and I'm like, God, why did I just get sucked into that and keep watching the other episodes? I've not watched the last episode or whatever they came back with at the end, but so why do we get sucked into that stuff? Is this the whole wanting to watch the train wreck and see some other things, or is it a detached, like what sucks us into something like Tiger King?
Oh, I don't know, but it definitely sucked me in for sure. I think it's exactly the train wreck. I mean, because I don't know about you, but it was just so unbelievable. The characters, it's like truth is stranger than fiction for sure. Like
one of the most shocking things was that the whole thing didn't happen in Florida. I kind of expected it to all happen in Florida, but I didn't realize that I guess, we live in a very interesting country, so we've got a lot of diversity across the country. And yeah, if you've not watched Tiger King, do yourself a favor and watch parts of it. And then you can kind of get a sense for what people are talking about and why they're getting sucked into it. And you'll also realize, I think this is another way to have a great gratitude practice. Realize how good you all have it. You're not in that environment. At least most of the folks that I know are not in that environment where we're raising big cats.
Absolutely. But yes, it was a good show.
So as we go through this stuff, and I've got what feels like note cards and pages worth of notes. There's a component of this where it seems like we've got to just look at it and say, look, everybody's going through it. Everybody's going through it in a different way. It's really hard for us to understand somebody else's perspective as they go through it. The best way to do that is to ask some questions, think about some of the tools that we've discussed here, but maybe folks aren't familiar with the Trap It, Map It, Zap It, folks inside your family where you can have these conversations. What else should we talk about related to just kind of moving through this period, and maybe even just to bridge two questions together? So what else should we talk about relative to this? And what's the exciting stuff that we've got as we go forward? We now have this great experience that we've all had. What's exciting about it as we go forward?
Yeah, there's lots that we can still talk about around different tools. I mean, another thing I would be remiss if I didn't bring up is just around self-care right now. Really important. So, sort of prolonged anxiety and stress will drive burnout for people. So, and, the World Health Organization had already classified burnout at epidemic levels and had classified it as a condition, which had never been done before this year. And it's at epidemic levels. I think one poll or survey from Gallup showed that upwards of 70% of people either somewhat or extremely burned out. And this was before COVID-19. So it's a real problem. And I think now with ill-defined roles with remote work and ill-defined expectations around what success looks like, people are going to drive and drive and drive. And so burnout is real and probably even realer now. And so making sure we're taking care of ourselves is really important. And we've kind of lost all of our schedules. Okay, I go to the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and, I connect with my friends here, all these things that feed our soul and help us care for ourselves are gone. So we have to create new ways and new routines around self-care. It's really important now.
So what happens if I'm out there and I'm thinking about, it's self-care. I just don't have time for it. I just have to keep doing the things that I'm doing because so many people are counting on me and so many other things are going on. How do I convince myself that self-care is important?
Right. So, self-care is not a luxury. It is an absolute necessity. There's the whole image, you've got to put your own oxygen mask on first. And that should be the image that people keep in their minds. If you aren't caring for yourself, you cannot care for others. And it leads to anxiety, it leads to burnout, which can lead to depression and a whole host of other physical health issues from heart disease, we need to take care of ourselves. It is an absolute necessity. And I like to give people the sort of analogy of filling your tank. You can't run a car on empty.
Right.
You can only go for so long.
Yeah.
You've got to refill the tank. So you got to keep in your mind, build balance into, and it doesn't mean you need to make spa appointments and overhaul your whole fridge and work out. I think that's what stops people from doing self-care. It's I can't, make over my entire life. Self-care is built in small ways and small moments throughout our day. And if you build balance into your day, you can really kind of keep that tank with some gas in it. So an example could be if you wake up, roll over in bed and first thing you do is check your phone, then you hop into, back-to-back meetings until noon. You work through lunch to catch up on stuff. If that's your day, your tank is already probably, a quarter to a half empty. So what are you going to do to put something back in that tank? Are you going to try to take a 5-minute break or take a 20-minute walk later? So try to build balance into your day where when you're emptying the tank, you're putting something back in.
You just described many of my days.
Yes.
So
many of ours.
It's kind of interesting as you're going through this. One of the patterns that I'm seeing is that all of these things kind of build on each other and can build on each other in a negative way and compound in a negative way. And on the opposite side, all of the things that we can do can actually build in a positive way. We really have to choose which way are we building. Are we building negative and compounding that way, or are we building positive and compounding that way? Is that the right way to think of this?
Love it. Yeah, absolutely. And it is. I like the way that you're looking at that. Yeah, absolutely is. And the cool thing about when you start doing say you start doing one thing that we talked about today, maybe you think of 3 great things that happened at, you start doing that at your dinner table, you start to feel better. And then that builds on it. And then you're oh, well, maybe I'll try this other thing. And then they do, to your point, they all build on each other and you kind of get this positive trajectory going, which is extremely powerful.
And none of the things that we've talked about or that you've mentioned today sound like they take a significant amount of time.
No, they don't. It's right. It's everything is sort of small practices, that you can sort of incorporate into your day. And yeah, and it's we just need to be intentional about it and choose a couple things to start with and then build from there. And they can be real game changers. You can do trap it, map it, zap it. If I'm having a day where I'm feeling a lot of anxiety, I'll do it 100 times. I'll just keep catching here you go again. Here you go. You just keep catching yourself and bringing yourself back.
It's kind of cool. It's not like there's this okay, well, I've got to wait until the whole day is done. And then I'm going to go ahead and journal and I'm going to keep it all there. And I know some people will use that as a practice, but it doesn't have to build up. It doesn't have to build that way. And I can tell you when I've suffered burnout and just where I just kind of feel like, oh, the entire world is overwhelming. I am starting to fall apart here. I don't know if I should even be doing the work that I'm doing. And I look at it pragmatically. It's hard to do it right when you're in the moment. And actually, I would say it's impossible to do right when you're in the moment, or at least I've struggled trying to do it right in the moment because each of those things build on each other. But if you can step back and say, what's really changed? Like what has significantly changed in the last 24 hours to create this situation? Then things can become a little bit more clear. And I shared this on a previous episode where I went through a period, I was just three things kind of compounded on top of each other. It was kind of like, and this isn't the example, but it was like getting into a car. Well, actually, I'll tell you the example. I had a challenging conversation with a customer. I had a argument, I think, inside our house. And I'm forgetting the third one. I think I was just exhausted. Like I just wasn't getting enough sleep. And then had all three of those things happen at the same time. And suddenly I thought, hey, why am I in this business? Does it make sense for me to be in this business? And when 72 hours, I was looking at where the business was going and how all the numbers are moving in the right direction and things are really positive. Yet I got into a period where it just felt debilitating and the funk was real, even though intuitively I was trying to tell myself, look, you've got this. You can just power through it. You've got different ways that you can approach it, get back to basics. Yet I still found myself in that trap. What I did is I took a nap. I got some sleep, caught up there. I went back and looked at the data and said, look, nothing significantly has changed. How much of this is my perception of a reality that's much more anxious than it really should be? And how can I be more logical in the way that I look at these things? And what I'm taking away from this conversation is rather than wait to the point where that becomes a breaking point, do the daily things to help release some pressure throughout and not get to that breaking point. Is that fair?
Yeah. No, I think that's true. And your example is super real for people. I think we've all been there and gotten ourselves into that corner, or into that hole. There's sort of, I'll just throw another facet at you of sort of interesting of how our brains work. In addition to, scanning for those negative emotions, we also all have these belief systems that we call them iceberg beliefs. And they're called iceberg beliefs because 99% of them lay hidden below the surface of our consciousness.
Yep.
They kind of run the show nonetheless because they're big and they're bold. And by the time we're 8 or 9, they start to get formed by our parents or our caregivers growing up. And by the time we're 18 or 19, they get kind of set in stone. Okay. And they usually contain the words must or should. And they're very strong. They're like these self-limiting beliefs we have, these sort of contracts we make about how the world should work and how we should be in the world. The world should be fair. I should always be liked. I should always be there for the people I love. If you have that and you think you should be perfect at work, you're going to have work-life balance issues. These two beliefs are going to come colliding together. Or perfectionist, I should, get everything right. I am a classic perfectionist. And I tell myself, again, multiple times per day, you're only human, you're doing the best you can. Because we will default to these beliefs. And many times we're not even aware of them. Mm-hmm. But they're running the show for us behind the scenes nonetheless. So some of the stuff that the skills we give you in Equilibrium are around like uncovering what your beliefs are mm-hmm. and giving you tools to work around them. And some of the tools are really easy. It's just like what I was saying around like a mantra or an affirmation to counteract that thought.
This has been an awesome conversation. I am wondering, are there other tools that are really important to you that you'd like to share with the audience, or other things that we've not gotten into that are important to share with those who are listening?
I would just say, particularly for right now, for the world we're living in, having, maybe two things. One, having some self-compassion. I think that we are all, we can't do as much as we could do before, not as easily. And we can all tend to be a little hard on ourselves around, well, why can't I focus, for example, is really hard right now for people, and focusing, and maybe we're not focusing as easily, and it's harder for us now. And so having a little compassion for ourselves that like, because we're stressed, it's harder to do stuff. So being a little gentle with ourselves, talking to ourselves as we would talk to your child or a friend, Yeah.
There are folks in my family who would say that it's probably better that I don't talk to others the way I would talk to my family.
Okay. Maybe not the way you do, but
in group, out group, and like take care of yourself. And
I would just one quick ending thing that there is something called post-traumatic growth, and whereas when we can come out of a really challenging situation and grow and even transform from it, and not that we should put that expectation on ourselves, but just to know that some of the most challenging times can be an opportunity for growth. And if you want to look for that learning and see that, you can probably find it. So I would just want to end on that note.
That's an awesome way to end. The thing that comes to mind there is that whole idea of iron sharpens iron, or even as nature, when you look at, and I'm going to demonstrate my lack of awareness of nature here, but as a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, there's this transition that happens, the stress and pressure that if it doesn't happen, it doesn't turn into this thing. There's coal and diamonds, like all of these different examples that happen out there. There are positive things that will come out of all of this, and we will make it through this as we move forward. So where can people find out more about the cool things you're working on and engage with you if they'd like to continue the conversation?
Great. Yeah. Thanks for that opportunity. So you can find me at alannafincke.com. That's my name, ALANNAFINCKE.com. And can find me there. If anyone's interested in health coaching, I'd love to hear from you. And you should also check out mequilibrium.com. And that's just the word equilibrium with an M before it. That's where I work in. It's an incredible company with an incredible product that's, we all need a little resilience right now.
We definitely do. This has been great. Alanna, thank you very much for the time today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.